So, you ready?
Yeah, I'm born ready.
Let's go! Let's talk about musical theatre stuff.
Yeah.
Are you excited?
Yeah, oh, so excited. Was
Leave
that
me
like
hanging.
a,
Yeah, like
I wasn't
a
sure if
high
that was like a handshake, if it was
I remember when we met, really cold day, a bit like this. We were both doing a concert and I was playing for some opera singers and you were performing with some of the Hamilton peeps, weren't you? And your MD got stuck on a train.
Oh, yeah.
And little old Claire stepped in. That's how we met.
Oh, that
Funny
was
time.
fun concert though.
It was well fun. So, how do you approach balancing the music and lyrics with the emotional arc of a character? And are there moments when one takes precedence over the other?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think there is, in like a, this isn't disparaging to like the great canon of musical theatre, but in like a good musical, the lyrics should marry well enough with the music that like it's telling the same story.
Sure.
It should be in alignment. I think with a lot of people, if you don't sort of understand the form, you can sometimes be confused as to why these characters are just sort of, you know, belting in your face all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And it needs to be that these characters are moved to express themselves in that way at that moment. There's a great saying of, you know, if you can't improve on silence, don't speak. If you can't improve on stillness, don't move. And I think that's super important for performers because they feel an impulse to voice that particular emotion in that particular way, in that particular moment. And so it's about making that feel organic. Within the framework of working in commercial theatre and you're going into a show like Wicked or Phantom or Les Mis, which has been going for so long, the lighting state is the lighting state. You can't call in the designer or the lighting designer to go, I'm going to stand here in this bit because my character just feels that organically. Which you can if you're part of the original process, which I've been sort of lucky to be in a couple of times, whether that's sort of Frozen or Hamilton or Motown. You can have that, which is lovely, but on some of those bigger commercial shows, it's about finding the impulse and saying those words, singing those songs, because your character has to sing them. Romeo and Juliet, if the dad is like, yeah, cool, don't worry about Paris. Seems like you don't want to marry him, fine. Romeo and Juliet have a lovely marriage, you know, and disappear together and it's fine. What is interesting is when these characters are forced into situations where they have to act in certain ways, and so in the marrying of that, it's like as technical as you can be with the vocal. The technicality of it should always be married to and should always be in service of telling the story.
Obviously we met for a coffee to catch up before this, and I was just really fascinated about your background in terms of your classical training and then studying at drama centre. Can you just tell us a bit about that? Because I didn't know that about you. Do you keep that kind of quiet?
No.
The dark side.
The dark side. No, I think it's so funny. In my, the school that I went to had a very good choir attached to it. And so I was a chorister from the age of 7 to, 13, 14 when my voice broke. And we did, you know, lots of sort of recordings at like Abbey Road. We did the
Did you?
Yeah, we did the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, Harry Potter soundtrack, Sleepy Hollow. So like, there were fun bits. And then after my voice broke, I went back as a choral scholar. Sort of we did tours to Italy and New York. So like I was very lucky in that sense to sort of be singing that side of music. There was a moment when I was a lot young. I was doing a concert at the Barbican. I think I was like 12. And it was a Raymond Gubby sort of Christmas concert. And I was singing We're Walking in the Air.
Oh yeah, club banger classic.
Absolutely.
Let's go to the club.
Slowly. And my mum had, because it was, you know, my first sort of solo concert in a half decent sized venue, had got tickets for a bunch of family. And I remember like singing this song and like hearing my like family being like applauding. But I remember hearing one one specific aunt and was like hearing a Nigerian accent, and I was like, oh, I guess that means I wonder if there's like jollof rice that we'll be having for dinner tonight. And like, as I was singing the song, that was my preoccupation.
How funny.
And I remember thinking, it would be really interesting if I was telling stories that I actually cared about.
Right.
That this wasn't just technical. It wasn't just I made the right sounds and people applauded and were like, you're so fantastic. And I was literally thinking about dinner. Sort of the world of, okay, you can sing, interesting. The world of opera didn't really appeal to me, mainly because I didn't see anyone who looked like me, and also canon of music that I felt some of those roles that might be available to me didn't particularly appeal to me.
Okay.
And sort of the same with musical theatre. At the time, when I was just a wee lad, we hadn't quite opened up the casting conversation to having a black Javert or someone, you know, of mixed heritage playing, I don't know, Billy Flynn in Chicago.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do The Lion King.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, well, I guess that's not for me.
Okay.
I ended up auditioning for 3 drama schools. I was lucky enough to have an agent at the time as I was auditioning.
Oh, is that a classical music agent you had?
No, that was an acting agent.
Right.
I was a sort of kiddie acting agent. Working class Italian Sylvia Young.
Okay.
Where it was called the Anna Share Theatre, and we pay like £4, £5 a class. And it's where a lot of the EastEnders lot came from.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, there's like a lot of the like North London acting lot who didn't have the money to go to like the fancy places. Anyway, they had an agency attached to them, and then from there I had an offer from another agent, and I was applying to these drama schools. And I remember I walked into the drama centre, and it was just a very rugged, rough and ready place.
Yeah, it's an artistic vibe, isn't it? Yeah, because I played there a few times.
Yeah, and it was a little bit chaotic, but it felt like my kind of chaos.
Cool.
I think we were lucky enough we had 11-hour days. It was sort of like turn up at 9:30 and leave at 8:30, and sometimes, you know, stay later to work on your own rehearsal exercises or get stuff done. And that just felt like the kind of bubble that felt very healthy to be in, maybe.
I know, I get it. It was similar with me.
I think there's an odd thing that happens, I think, at drama schools where they tell you, we're going to break you down to build you back up again, which I sort of say, like, take some of it. In that, you should be open to learn new stuff.
Yeah.
I think the notion of breaking down feels, if you're too sort of, if you follow that doctrine too much, can be difficult, because people go, oh well, I need to be broken down, and like I don't have self-worth or talent or something interesting that people are appealing to. I think all of these drama schools, what they recognize in all of their auditionees that then makes them want to offer a place to someone is that you would be successful if you went to any of the half-decent drama schools.
Yeah.
And it's about why this would be a good marriage of you coming to our drama school.
Got you.
And so it's sort of about retaining your own sense of uniqueness and quality of, like, by the time you get to third year, remember you are still good. There was a reason, there was a spark, there was something in you that people said, this is worth having, and like, this is an interesting storyteller.
Yeah.
I think the biggest danger you can have is trying to erase that unique quality, because you spend your first 2 years sort of erasing it, and then by the time you get to third year, you're like, am I any good?
Yeah.
So like, you can take stuff on and be as receptive to everything as possible. And I'm sure this is a tired metaphor, but it's, you know, it's a toolbox. Everything is a toolbox. If it's useful, pick it up. If it's not, drop it. But like, there might come a point in 5 years' time when you're out in the industry when that penny drops and you go, oh, animal studies. Oh,
Yeah.
Or like, oh, my character's shoes.
Definitely.
Right, that makes sense.
100%.
And so I think that for me was then interesting because I then thought, oh, I'll go into Shakespeare or TV stuff. And like, my first couple of jobs were at the Donmar, and we're at, you know, the RSC and, you know, up at the Glasgow Sits. even within that, a lot of those parts, people would be like, oh, you can sing. Can we fit that in somewhere? And so the sort of surprise that I had when sort of 3 or 4 years after that, I ended up, on the West End in some of those roles. Obviously that's where you ended up in musical theatre, because you had been singing since the age of 7, if not younger. But also sometimes you have to take the long way around, and actually that was the basis for me ending up there.
I think as well, it's so interesting what you said about drama school. I think it's a similar thing at Music Conservatoire. I'm very interested in actors, and I've done a bit of acting myself. And I think the really interesting thing as well is it's industries that require so much resilience and toughness. And in some ways, that thing of the breaking you down and stuff like that, it does build you up, because then you go into the industry and in a way you feel like it's a little bit easier. I don't know if you agree or not in some ways, because you're like, well, I'm much more sure of myself now once I've left, because I haven't got people constantly firing opinions, in terms of teachers and stuff, although they were welcome to me when I was there. I was happy to hear them, but I think that's a really interesting point you made.
It's a twofold thing. I think you need to build resilience, because it can be tough to have a teacher who's like constantly going at you and going, And I think a lot of the culture now, we look back on some of those tutors and go, oh, was that the healthiest dynamic?
Agree, yeah.
And
definitely,
sometimes you just need to be resilient. Because also on the flip side of that, there will be a director, or there'll be, an actor who you're working with who you don't have the ability to go to HR or to say, or go to a producer on set and be like, that person is being an absolute so-and-so. And so sometimes having the ability to work on your craft and have enough of your craft that you can do the work in private means that you turn up, on set, or like first day of rehearsal when everyone's like, oh, you're all really good, or like that person wasn't giving you much, and yet you somehow found a performance that is still telling the story. But I would say to any young performers, be nice, do good work is the only advice I'd ever really give. But sometimes people aren't nice to you, and so it's like, how do you still manage to do the work amidst all of that?
I know, I completely agree with that. It's all relevant to lots of different parts of the performing industry. I did also want to, if you don't mind, touch on the fact that you told me you did some countertenor. Do you mind me bringing
No, go on.
I'm just fascinated by it. I just think it's cool because you're a baritone. Bass baritone.
I would say bass baritone,
Because I'm working with a countertenor called James Lane at the moment. He's fantastic, and he says when he does MT stuff, he sings baritone. Do you think your classical training and your ability to be able to sight read things easily as a chorister, do you think that's helped in your career now, just out of interest?
There would be a couple of things I would say is super helpful for that basis, sort of helps me with. Firstly, it's workshops of new musicals.
Oh yeah.
When you're workshopping a new musical, if you are available and if you are good and you're consistent and you can, within a couple of days, pick up the music and go, right, I can sing this. People suddenly go, oh, you're great. I can see what this show's meant to be because you can sing the music.
And I suppose also having a really good solid technical foundation must be helpful.
So my week would be get into school at 8 and there would be a choir rehearsal from 8 till 8:40, and then we'd sing a sort of song and a motet at the school assembly. And so that was Monday to Friday. And then Saturday I'd get up and I'd go play rugby, and then that would be finished at like 1. And then from 2 till 4 I'd go to the Anachea Theatre. And then in Angel, and then I'd make my way to South Ken, where I'd sing at the Brompton Oratory from 4:45 till 7.
That's some schedule.
So we'd sort of rehearse before Mass, and then sing the 6-7 Mass. And then I'd make my way home 8 o'clock. And then I would sometimes help my dad with church music on Sunday. Sort of singing in the choir there. So the helpful thing of singing that much was that I would be on the rugby pitch going like, get him, smash his head off, come on, take him out.
Lads on tour.
And if you can't turn up with enough sort of vocal capacity to sing the mass, then your choir master's pissed at you. So it's like, how are you taking care of your voice, even in those moments where you just want to be shouting on the rugby pitch, when you're singing that much, like, what are you learning about your voice? How are you constantly checking in? It gets to a place where I'll wake up in the morning and I'll just be, oh, okay, we're fine. And there'll be other times when I go, oh, okay, steaming in the shower for half an hour. You know, like, we need to sort of gently warm up today because, and you know, that part of that is helpful, because once you get to doing a certain show, if you're doing Hamilton or if you're doing Wicked, they call it alphabetitis, where you do your first number and you sort of go, oh, I'm going to have to, once you've sung The Wizard and I, very often, alphabets will go off stage. Yeah. Because they go, Wizard and I! Oh, can't do it.
Yeah, that's like a known.
And so, because you know that you still got to sing Defying Gravity and you've got For Good, and
that's enough.
Like, and so you're like, oh, can I?
Yeah.
And so it's about having that awareness of your voice and the stamina that you're building up, because you'll be doing 400 shows a year most times on most of those shows.
This is it. You know, when I'm teaching and singing myself to people, I always say to them, I'm not training you to just get through one performance. I am training you to have longevity and to be able to survive a run. That is so important, and sometimes I think that is quite underestimated by singers and vocal teachers, frankly.
There's just on a pure fact thing.
Please.
Most equity contracts, you only get 28 sick days.
Right.
If you can't turn up and sing the Wizard and I, okay, but if that happens more than 28 times, you're getting docked.
Right.
That's coming out of your paycheck.
Okay.
It just has like financial implications.
Yeah.
And even the sick days, if you're playing a lead, it's up to a certain amount. Yeah. Right? And so it gets to a point where if you're not taking care of your voice as a lead, every time you take a sick day, you might be getting docked 100, 200, 300 quid.
Yeah, this is the importance of having,
And when you get used to like bringing in a certain amount of money and you're living within your means, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm ill. And now sort of I was paying rent this month and I'd paid for a holiday and I wasn't expecting to get ill. And so now I need to push through and struggle, and then sometimes because you feel like you're going to push through, you might do damage. So it's I think it's.
I think that's a really good.
Just on practical.
No, I think that's important, because I'm really big on all of that. So that actually comes to a really good question, if I do say so myself. Wow. Okay, Claire. All right, you do you, boo. But I think musical theatre often demands a balance between singing technique and acting authenticity. And how do you ensure that your own vocal choices serve the character without compromising your vocal health and authenticity from the point of view of an actor?
As an actor, you've been chosen to do this role for however long. Sometimes in some of the smaller theatres it will be like a 6-week run or an 8-week run if you're at the Donmar or Regent's Park Open Air. If you're doing West End, for them to make money back tends to be a year for a musical. In that case, you just need to be able to do it consistently, time in, time out. You'll see it, even some people who go to dance auditions, and during the audition they'll trick and they'll do a backflip. And everyone will be like, oh, yeah, amazing, yeah, let's put it in the show. Cool, you now need to do that 400 times.
Yeah.
And so when you're putting it in the rehearsal process, you're like, you sure you want to do that lift?
Yeah.
You sure you want to do that riff? You sure you want to do that run?
Yeah.
Because, but on those days when you can't. But also it's coming from a place with all of these things, and we are choosing as part of the creative team someone who is an interesting performer, who's a good storyteller. there's that famous Dame Judi Dench Sending the Clowns.
Yeah.
Like, is that the best you've ever heard it sung? No. But is it the best that the story has been told that you've seen on camera? Like, there's a reason why we've all seen the YouTube video, right?
Yeah.
Is because sometimes where you are as actor and where character is meet in the middle, and there's an interesting sort of synthesis that happens there. I think sometimes you can talk yourself out of jobs because you can say, oh, I'm not so-and-so, or I'm not Cynthia Erivo, so they're not going to cast me as Elphaba. And it's like, but if they're still seeing you in the room, then there is a reason why you're there.
Yeah.
Someone has seen you, and your job is to get everyone else on board with where you're at. Not just the panel, also the audience, and it's to convince the audience that this is the story that's worth listening to.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, as a performer, you're going into a room and telling a story to 2,000 people in the dark.
Yeah.
And they have signed a contract that says, we're here to listen to that story, make it interesting.
Yeah.
And so as long as you're making it interesting, listen, I'm a fan of an option.
Same.
There have been times when the voice has not been voicing.
Okay.
And sometimes you just need to like make it work. You need to still tell the story.
Is it?
No.
Gotta, like, you know, yeah, absolutely. I think we're on the same page about a lot of things, you know. Well, something that I love about musical, because I love musical theatre. I have to be honest, my roots are a lot more in musical theatre than opera. Just get out now. But I grew up on musical theatre. I know like every musical like the back of my hand. I love musicals so much. I myself definitely got more of a musical theatre voice. Right? And songs often express what characters can't say in the dialogue. How do you uncover and convey the unspoken subtext in a musical number?
Again, so much of this is a collaborative process. So there's something about, I can come in and go, actually, my Fiero has been having it off with Dr. Diddamond. It's like, subtext?
Wow.
Sure, okay,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But
I
like,
love that.
so there are choices and there are choices, and it's like, what is this? How is this best serving the story? So part of that will be a conversation with the cast members who you're on stage with, and part of that will be the work that you have done yourself. And there was a lovely moment where Giles Terrera was doing Wait For It. The lyric is...
This was in Hamilton.
Sorry, this is in Hamilton,
okay, this
sorry.
is in Hamilton, yeah.
And he sings the line, kiddo, she writes me a letter every day, keeping the bed warm while her husband is away. And the audience guffawed and laughed. I'm like, ha 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 ha. And I remember Lynn talking about it on a comment, I think it was like Graham Norton, he was like, oh my God, you Brits, you're so repressed, you know, everyone laughs at Wait For It. And I was like, no, they're laughing because in that moment, Giles goes, I'm keeping her bed warm while her husband is away.
Yeah.
And in that tiniest of choices, it said to the audience of, and Lynn's right, of carry on.
Yeah.
Keep it a bit more. And like, it gave the audience permission to laugh. And so I think there's something in that, in the interstitium, in the moments of exchange, and again, it comes back to that thing of if you can't improve on stillness, don't move. If you make a choice of, suddenly we're like, oh, there's like another thing that's happening there, as opposed to if I was just like, if you add in that thing, it's like, oh, there's a nervous quality, or there's an electricity between these two people. And as humans, our brain is constantly trying to keep us safe, right? And so the amygdala is going, signal, 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 signal. Okay, that means fire, dangerous. That means, okay, that's a love connection. Oh, she's flirting with him, right? We're constantly picking up on these signals and constantly trying to pick up on what the story is.
Yeah, sure.
And so if you give the audience enough of that signal, they'll go, oh, there's something there. Which is why the improving on stillness is so important. Because if you're just making floor patterns, you're just like ambling around the stage, suddenly nothing means anything. Whereas if you make them hear you ragtime, your pen, sword will be the summon. Oh, the power of the pen. Like, if you are engaged in that, then suddenly we're going, you have these inner and outer contacts. And I think that is the important thing. When you're on stage, you are always in contact with a person, object, or an idea.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just declaring.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you can be engaged with that, because you are engaged in that as character, when I say Fiero, like, there's a certain quality that if you are truly engaged with that person, it will evoke something in you, because that's what humans do. And so if you can bring your character alive by making them be in contact with the things that happen in their life, then the choices that you can make become more and more interesting, because you can go, oh, I'm thinking about Fiera, I'm thinking about Nessa Rose, I'm thinking about the wizard. So that suddenly it's like, oh, where is Oz for you right now?
Yeah.
What does that evoke? What does home feel like? What does Munchkinland feel like? What does Dorothy feel like? All of those things, suddenly you go, oh, now I can make a decision, because you've got an opinion on stuff, because humans have opinions on stuff. And ultimately, a musical is just us watching the human experience on stage. And so if you can do that through song, and you can go through the sort of torture of being alive and the journey of that, and going, oh, actually, I need to be alive. I can't be alone anymore. Okay. And like we trace that journey, suddenly you go, oh, this is like a whole thing. That was a good 50 quid well spent.
For sure.
It was worth it. And like, I don't mind the fact that I've been sat in the dark for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Because that person took me on a journey.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's all you ever really, whether that's a TV show, whether that's a musical, whether that's an album, when you listen to something, you're like, am I changed from having listened to this song? I don't know. Watching this show, this film. As an artist, that's all you ever really want to do, is hold up windows and mirrors to people's lives and be like, do you see yourself? Are you having a peek into someone else's life?
I love that, and I think, again, I'm so happy to have someone who's an actor, musical theatre person, and I think all of it lends to classical stuff as well. I'd just love to know, in your opinion as well, what do you think gives a musical, or a show for that matter, or an opera even, if you've got any opinions on that, the power to transcend time and connect with new generations?
There's this odd thing that can happen where sometimes a musical or a piece of art can really speak to a moment, and that can be why it's interesting. It can be why it takes off, and suddenly we're like, oh, this is like phenomenal.
Sure.
It can be really telling, because I think a lot of us like to consume our art neutrally and like to think that it's not political, but literally everything is political. If you are a human, if you're a woman, if you are black, if you use a hospital, if you need public transport, if you want to send your kid to school, all of those things are political, because all of it needs funding. All of those things, for some reason, we're still having a discussion about. You might have contraceptive arguments and freedom of choice. I can't believe we're still having that discussion. But, and again, I don't want to get too heavy with it, but that is something that is inherently political. If you're talking Romeo and Juliet, that feels like a personal love story. However, it is set against the backdrop of two houses, both alike in dignity, right? And so if we have these two households, both alike in dignity, what are we saying? Who is that? West Side Story. What are we saying when we put on that production, when we cast certain people in certain roles? What does that human brain that is trying to make sense of all the signals that you're telling us, what connections does it jump to? Something like Dear Evan Hansen, which is a really interesting show, because I think at the time, it really captured a moment of like what we thought about mental health and social media and whatever. And I think actually the thing I always found interesting was actually if you had Evan's mum being a black woman and Evan being a young black kid, and he then all of a sudden is moving in basically and has been adopted by this rich white family next door. Suddenly there's a whole other like layer of, she walks into the room and it's like, no, I'm none of those things. I'm fine. And so like class and race suddenly intersect in an interesting way in America. If I was to put on that production now, that might be something that I'd look at casting wise because it gives it a different resonance, right? But then also you look at something like Hamilton, and I think at the time when it was developed, Lin does his first performance of that in the Rose Garden in like 2009, and then it hits Broadway by 2015. At the time, everyone was so on this liberal high of like, of course we can have black people as founding fathers and like immigrants, we get the job done, yes. There was this self-satisfied sort of Democrat, we have done a really good job in America and nothing could ever go wrong and Hillary's gonna be the 45th president of the United States, and you go, and that self-congratulatory audience perception of I'm not racist because I don't see Hamilton is super interesting, right? Because there was a complacency, I think, with how people were seeing the world being served, and so that piece, which everyone says is political, it's still political and it's still speaking to a moment. But I think what was interesting was the moment that it was sort of speaking to and answering in 2015 is different to the moment that it's responding to now. And I still think it's a genius piece of work. I just think as consumers, we put a lot on it because we wanted it to be this thing that solved everything and said, oh, it's there, it's on this pedestal. Musical theatre and theatre in general will keep getting more and more diverse, and we'll have Hamilton and we'll have Motown and we'll have Tina. And you go, and now you look at the West End. You look at the West End in 2025 and you go, who are the leads? Who are the people who are producing shows? Who are the people who are writing those shows? How many of those people are people of colour? How many of those people are stories that are about women, that are new musicals, that are adaptations of films about people from certain demographics? It is constantly in flux. If I could say anything, I would say I think British theatre is in a place now, arts in general, is in a place now where it's lost its power. And I don't think that's an accident. I think as funding has been removed or has become conditional, and you feel that you can't criticise anybody or the government of the day, because if you do, then your funding might get pulled. Arts Council applications that then go, we're so grateful to Arts Council England for giving us this because, and you go, oh, if I'm making you say thank you for this, how encouraged are you going to be to make work that is necessary, that is piercing, that is analytical? Because you're just struggling to survive. You're just trying to get your funding from anywhere.
100%.
And so in doing that, in making art something that has to be funded by the privileged, by the big companies, you create an environment that says, oh, wait a second, now it has to be those people who we're making the art for. They need to feel seen in those mirrors. They need to have a window that they would like to look through. And so there's an inherent, actually, who is the art for? How democratic is that art? Where does that sit? So I think I want art to be for everyone, and I think that should be our goal. I think there is a question around funding. I think there's a question around relevance and the work that we make and why we make that work and who we're making it for. Hey, listen, I wish I could say there's an answer for, and that's the silver bullet that solves it all, because I think it's bigger than that. It's not just the British problem. It's not an American problem. It's more global than that, but also we can only our own little backyard.
Yeah.
And so I think we just need to be brave and make the interesting work, sort of make Hamiltons and make the casting decisions.
We've got to get back to being a bit more brave in general, I think.
Yeah. Listen, it's interesting, isn't it? Whether we like it or not, there are certain presidents or certain prime ministers or certain MPs that people have voted for over the past whatever. And so I can't turn around and say they're all stupid. I can have that personal opinion, but who does that say? They're going to see that adaptation of that film because for whatever reason you have lost the argument. And so it's how can we counteract making work that is another adaptation of a film because that is the only thing that the people with money have to go and see.
It's really tough. I feel it a lot in art song as well, which is obviously what I specialise a lot in. A lot of people just kind of want to stay on the same path and they want to stick to being very traditional about the genre. I'm just like, we're not going to keep that particular genre alive, in my humble opinion, if we don't come in with a new brave angle. Let's use a bit of multimedia. We're in the age of Netflix. People can watch something and listen to something at the same time and comprehend it. It doesn't all have to just be sitting and listening, but I also think there's a place for that as well. But we can open the door to new people who might go and see something multimedia with a film in the background, and then they might think, actually, I'll try a Wigmore. There's a big fear of going out of tradition, especially in classical music.
Which has always been the case. There has always been some sort of resistance to innovation, which is understandable because once you've never done the thing, people are like, oh no, I don't like it. And then once it's been done, you sort of go, oh, yeah, no, we'll have a conversation in 10 years' time and everyone would have always been behind this argument. I'm always on board with
that.
And
so true.
That's the tricky bit. Is that actually sometimes it is, people have always wanted to be on the right side of history. And so when it comes to shifting, they're like, So I hope for innovation, I hope for bravery. I think there are some people who are consistently there and are trying to do the work, the innovation, the brave work. And even if your contribution to that is to just in passing pick up a paintbrush and spend 10 minutes supporting, great. You don't need to be the one person who's innovating.
And now just one more kind of practical question is, when you have got a long run, how do you keep performances fresh and vibrant and non-monotonous? I mean, I'm sure that would never be the case with you anyway. But, for example, how long was Frozen and Hamilton? How long were the runs for those?
So those, for West End, it will be a year contract, and you'll tend to have like 2 months rehearsal, and you'll also, before that, for the most part, know the show already. You'll have learned your music and you'll have auditioned your songs, and so you've learned them inside out and done sort of the requisite work in private. Firstly, once the show's up and running, you have, I think you accrue half a day's holiday for every week that you work. And so you end up, after sort of including rehearsals and your run, with about 30 days holiday, which excluding embargo, you need to get into about 9 months' time. And so the sort of holiday schedule suddenly becomes this like mad jigsaw of like, we can't have a George Washington off at the same time as Madison because the cover for them is the same, and if someone was ill, then
that's tricky.
And we don't want Elsa and Anna off at the same time. So
I've never thought about it.
And so all of a sudden, once embargo is lifted and everyone's allowed to start taking holidays, you're on stage and you're like, let it go. Oh, so that's someone different singing that. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, interesting.
So yes, it is 400 shows. And how many of those are with that original press night cast? Tends to be, like, barring illness and injury, around 30. of like actual performances that are with the same ensemble and with the same principal cast.
So you think they lend to you having more of a, because you react differently?
Yeah, because there will be a part of it that is, I'm used to you saying your line like this.
Yeah.
Oh, you are you? Yes. Well, I'm used to you saying your line like this. Oh, you are you?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, wait, that's weird inflection.
Yeah.
Or like, oh wait, you're behind me. Or, oh, you dropped the prop because you didn't know how to put the thing in the bag.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like that's sort of when it comes alive.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's also stuff where if it is something like Hamilton, that show is dense. There's like many words in that as there are in the Scottish play, or like the Merchant of Venice. So it's like, like sometimes you're like, where are we in the show? We call it the white room because sometimes you'll know something and you have a choice. If you blank, you're in this white room and all of the doors are white and you're like, wait, how do I get out? How do I get out? And you either trust to muscle memory to go, it's that way.
Yes.
And go that way. Or you go, wait a second, I think I can see a handle. And you like consciously go, I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing Okay, and you find that. And there have been times when that happens and you see it on someone else's face where they're like, and you're like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Here we go.
And that show is fun as well because it's on a click. Once it starts, and maybe 2 pauses, and they are, I think it's like during maybe the King's song and maybe Burn. Other than that, it's just like, we're going for an hour and 14. If someone comes off the track, you're like, pick it up, let's go. Otherwise you are messed up tonight. Sometimes you do just need to like keep alive in that moment. And Hamilton's one of those interesting ones where it is, and Shakespeare can be like this as well, where it's complex enough that you need to match the art. We had the orchestrator for Hamilton, Alex Lacamoire. He is so exacting, and he'll. You think you're doing it right, and then the luck attack comes, and he just like is like, oh, Obi, you were out of the pocket here, or you've got a bit lazy here, or like make sure that you're in that bit when you're like, oh gosh, I have got lazy. When the show demands something like that of you, you hitting authentically, honestly, the emotional beats. And are you hitting the musical beats? And is it as clean as you want it to be? Sometimes you are bringing your human self to this and just going, oh God, Washington feels like he's on his last thread right now. He's going to break. So maybe that brings a free bra energy that's interesting. Interest of trying to keep it fresh. 2 things. Firstly, keep it safe for the other performers on stage. So to never do anything that's so outside of what you have performed that they feel unsafe, but also that you're still telling the right story. I remember working with one performer who would, when he was on, so consistently do something that was out of character that it shifted what my character felt like I, as an actor, could respond truthfully to, which was then like, just status-wise, I was like, oh, if my character was in that situation, you wouldn't still be alive. And so it's like, if you were the king and I got annoyed at you and I, sort of swore at you or like got in your face and I'm the king, then you'd be like, oh no, this is that would be the end of the situation. And so it's in the interest of like, oh, I'm keeping it fresh. It's like, keep it safe, but also still tell the story. And like the story that you agreed upon by press night. Because I think sometimes I was just keeping it interesting. It's like, no, that is, how interesting is that if the audience is suddenly watching a new show that the director didn't agree upon? I'm curious that as a pianist, because I've got friends who have done things like Phantom or Lion King, been in the pit. I'm lucky in that, yes, I've got other actors who I can play alongside or whatever. When the dots are the dots, how different does that feel for you to do night after night? Like, how do you maintain this or do you need to keep it interesting?
I think there's...
Is it just technical?
No, not for myself.
Okay.
Well, also it kind of depends what I'm doing, but certainly for myself, I would say not. I'd say first of all, the adrenaline. I always like lean into that feeling of the adrenaline. You know what I mean? That always... Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I'm just going to say one thing, because I know some people are like, oh my God, I get the nerves. I'm like, the reason why I don't really get the nerves is because you only get nervous if you haven't really...
Well, there's a difference.
Yes.
There's a difference, right? There's anxiety from a lack of preparation.
Yes.
And there's just your normal, like...
Oh, we're doing this.
Cool, this is happening.
Okay,
and that's what I lean into.
Right,
if I've got anxiety, then I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
But I lean into that feeling, and that definitely keeps me fresh. My classical staff, there's a couple of singers I work with, and they're just so busy with their schedules. We don't have a lot of time to rehearse. It'll often just be on the day. It'll really be like, oh my God, I'd like to rehearse more. But sometimes now I think it's quite cool because you're constantly having to listen. But that feeling of being very active in the moment and not going on an autopilot is really important.
How do you not go on autopilot? Because that's not having time to rehearse. Whereas if you're doing like hundreds of performances, or like, you know, you and I are touring and we're in Beijing at this point and we've done this in a million cities, how do you keep that from being just 9 to 5 cash?
I don't think I'm naturally inclined to go on autopilot as a human being. I have to be honest, I've never rests on their laurels. I'm just not that way inclined. So I think naturally, I always think of the people paying the money, and then I'm like, I've got to be really focused. Like, that's just me as a person. But I think that thing of always being actively listening in the moment is absolutely crucial. But the audiences will always give you different reactions.
Yeah.
You'll get some nights and you're like, oh yeah, nice, like they're really reacting. Then you'll get somewhere like nothing. You're working so hard, and it's difficult.
As someone who accompanies a lot of actors and singers, what is your biggest bugbear, like room 101 for us mortifying performers?
What do you mean?
As in, like, what's the thing that you're like, I wish they would, or room 101, I wish they would stop doing that thing, or like the worst habit they could have, or the thing that really frustrates me is whether that's too much riffing, or I don't know.
For me, this might be a bit weird, but lack of consonance and like lack of clarity of text. When people prioritise beautiful singing over clarity of text and authenticity of interpretation, and they're so worried about sounding beautiful or being beautiful, and I think that's not true of... I'm like, just be ugly for a minute in terms of sometimes it's like if you go to an art exhibition and all the paintings are really, really beautiful, none of them are going to have the effect in the end. Whereas if there's a couple of balanced things that aren't so nice, like Damien Hirst is a really good example, because he'll have like a cow's carcass covered in flies and it's absolutely disgusting. Then in the next room you'll see the diamond skulls and you're like, wow. And that hits you so much because you've just been up against that like horrific carcass. Does that make sense? So I do sometimes wish people would be, because I also think that's more than true of life. Because in life, not everything is really beautiful, not everything is perfect. And I think people need to be a lot more brave about sounding not as beautiful as they always wish. But my other bugbear is, I think, always turn up prepared for your rehearsals. I don't get that very often now at all, perhaps more with students, but I'm really big on being a good colleague, and your rehearsals, in my opinion, a little bit different perhaps from coaching. You're not there to learn the music, you're there, everyone's ready to go, and how can we artistically, it's like an actor turning up and maybe not knowing their lines, and then I feel a bit like, well, then there's a slight issue because you're wasting time.
It's so interesting because I think some actors get into this, and some performers as well, in the same way that you were saying, I love listening, I love just being like in the vibe in that moment, in that pocket, and like having to listen. I know some actors who get into the sense of, I don't learn the lines until we're in rehearsal, or 4 weeks into rehearsal, because I want to be able to play, I want to be able to shift, I want to be able to discover it in the moment. And I'm like, yeah, and
yeah.
And like some people's processes are very different. Some people can turn around and go, right, I'm going to learn my lines this weekend.
Yeah.
And suddenly seem like they're off book, and you're like, wait, what? I feel like you hadn't, last week you didn't know them, now you do. Other people, it's you're still doing performances, like you're months deep in, and they're not where perfect, and you're like, why are you paraphrasing?
Yeah.
There are people in the front row who know the show inside out,
Yes.
and they have paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
Why am I getting vague?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I think there's something about part of why we do the requisite work on whether that's a facility or vocal quality or strength or whatever, is like you're not training to do like 10 press-ups.
Yeah.
Or to do 100 press-ups. It's that you have done so many press-ups in the past that when it comes to doing it, you're like, yeah, this is fine.
Absolutely. So that fight or flight thing when you're on stage or when you're in an audition or something doesn't kick in, and your body doesn't freak out and think, oh, what am I doing? This isn't natural to me. It's so within your body and your muscle memory that you're like, cool. I'm walking, essentially.
I had a singing teacher who said the thing that you need to work on is making sure that your average day is like 3 times better than everyone else's best. Your best day will be on a random Thursday when you're brushing your teeth and you go, ah! Yeah. Oh my God, that was clean.
Whoa.
That was so. You're casually hitting that over and over again, so that when on the bad days or on the average days, someone still hears you and goes, they were phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then you meet them backstage and you go, oh my God, if only you'd have That's my bugbear.
Classic.
That needs to all go in the bin. When you meet someone backstage, if only you'd seen the previous performance.
No.
Fudge off.
Not good.
Go somewhere else with that.
Not our problem. It's not very nice for the person
It's disrespectful.
when you're giving the compliment, you want them to go, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And like, if they give it back to you like that and you feel embarrassed, you're like, oh God, I wish I hadn't said that.
And you know what? That is one of my resolutions for 2025 is accepting compliments, because I think when someone says, oh my God, that sounded really great, or like, oh, your hair looks so pretty today, if you turn around and go, oh no, it doesn't, ultimately what you're saying is I have bad taste. Because
people's baseline of what they've heard you do, in your head, you know what you can get. So I understand the ego of it, but I had to train myself and be like, I had to really just like, even if it wasn't exactly how I wanted it to go, I was like, thank you so much. Because I also thought for some people who are really shy, like to come up and give you a compliment, that's absolutely huge for them. And you've got to think, they are the audience, or your friends, or whatever, or your colleagues even, and they deserve to be able to give that to you. I completely agree. Let's start. You're an amazing, amazing performer, and you've given an amazing, amazing interview.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just to finish.
Yes.
What's your favourite side dish? And why? This is right. You didn't expect that, did you?
My favourite side dish. Okay. Just to not preempt this, but like caveat this.
Okay.
In America, they don't do side dishes.
Okay.
They do like sharing dishes. And so you go, oh, can I get a, and like you come with it with a British sense of like, oh yeah, I'll just get a little bit of calamari, or a little bit of spinach, or a little grilled halloumi.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And then there's a squid just on your, like a whole plate of spinach. And I'm like, I'm not Popeye. I think it's a cultural thing of like, in the UK, we like a little, but also we would probably finish most of the food that's on our plate. Yeah. Whereas in New York, there's this sense of carry our bags or whatever, or like just like leave it there.
Okay.
I think probably, the thing is I eat anything.
Okay.
But I very rarely grill halloumi at home and then dip it in chili jam.
That's your favourite?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I've had some rogue answers in the past to some of these questions, but that is one I can fully agree with. Yeah, I love that. I love also putting honey on halloumi.
Yeah, well, that's why I like a little, yeah. Now the sweetness mixed with the, but no, I love cheese.
Halloumi at Nando's?
I haven't been to Nando's in a long time. It used to be like a budget-friendly sort of like cheeky Nando's. Now, I'm sorry Nando's, I know I'm not going to get spunk on, but like, you might, sorry.
I love that.
Lactose, I think, also this is a thing, singers, top tips. Drink water, but also like drink it before the recital.
Yeah.
Like it takes a while to get into your system. The number of people who are they I'm like, it's gonna take ages. Literally takes hours.
So
Wake up, drink your pints, get it into the system, flushing it out.
Top tips.
Acid reflux is real.
It's true. I mean, I tend to drink all my water before 12, and then I tend to not drink much after that.
Yeah, me too. Stay out, the vocals clean.
Look at me.
The mucus
I'm
is
a
going.
star in the
skin
making.
is fresh.
Oh, thank you.
But no, I love the cheese. I'm a sucker for cheese.
Fair play to you.
I know some people say that it clags. So why can't cows wear flip flops?
I don't know.
Because they're lactose.
Stick to the musicals and not the comedy crew. I'm joking. I've got one.
Here we go.
Knock knock.
Who's that?
Boo.
Boo.
Don't cry, it's only a joke.
All right, last one.
On that note.
Last one. What's the difference between a can of tuna, a bottle of super glue, and a piano?
Oh, I don't know! What is it?
You can tune a piano, but you can't piano a tuna.